Welcome to the Beyond Atheism podcast, with me, Nathan Alexander, and my co-host, Todd Tavares. Moving beyond questions of God's existence, this podcast asks, what's next in a world without God? If you're enjoying the show so far, make sure to like and subscribe, rate and review, and consider supporting us on Patreon.
The quest for knowledge is nearly universal, and the certainty that our beliefs in knowledge, no matter how strange or unfounded, are correct is definitely universal. Of course, different ideas and fundamental core beliefs can't all be true, but we can learn more about why people believe what they believe if someone is patient and curious enough to listen, and to ask if these beliefs are true. We are joined today by someone who listens and asks that very question. As a practitioner of street epistemology and the host of Being Reasonable, Mark Solomon conducts long-form interviews to reveal what lies behind deep-seated beliefs. Mark, welcome to Beyond Atheism.
Hey, Todd and Nathan, thanks so much for having me on. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, for coming on. Just to get started, can you just tell us what is street epistemology?
Yes. So street epistemology, it's a interesting term. And so it originated from a 2013 book called A Manual for Creating Atheists, believe it or not. And so it has the term street epistemology sort of has its roots in atheism, but it's sort of grown since then to not really involve atheism or any other ism. It's a conversational technique. It's a way to drill down to how do you know what you know. And it was originally started by Peter Boghossian, who I'll be assisting with in a documentary that he's working on coming up. And he wrote this book, and then he also wrote his second book, How to Have Impossible Conversations, which delved more into the tenets of street epistemology. So street epistemology really let me say what the goal of street epistemology is. The goal of street epistemology is to guide people through a collaborative, critical thinking process. Ideally, this collaboration models how to apply these newly learned skills to their own beliefs about the world. And so it's the idea of when we're having conversations about beliefs, whether you're a non-theist talking to a theist or a theist talking to a non-theist or any other belief for that matter, it appears that we're often talking about the wrong thing. And might seem a little counterintuitive, but when we're talking to people about beliefs, especially people who oppose our beliefs, often we're talking about the beliefs themselves. And which, that seems to be a normal way to look at it. But it seems that talking about beliefs in that manner isn't quite helpful all the time. How many times have you talked to your Uncle Jim across the Thanksgiving table, and you tell him your beliefs and he tells you his beliefs, and you don't get very far. And so the idea of street epistemology is coming up with a different way, a better, more friendly and more genuine interaction to better reflect on the quality of the methods one uses to weigh the reasons for being at a certain level of confidence that something is true. So when we're talking about street epistemology, we want to understand the belief. We want to know what the belief is and get a really good definition of the belief. But once we get that kind of squared away, my goal at that point is to sort of jettison that. I get the belief, I understand what the belief is, and now I don't really want to concentrate on the belief anymore if I can help it. Sometimes you do, but I'd rather not. I'm really trying to concentrate on how you know what you know. How did you form this belief? How do you go about forming beliefs in general? Because typically when someone has an ill-informed belief, it's not the only ill-informed belief they have. Because basically, whatever epistemology they're using to form that belief, they're probably using that same manner to form other false beliefs. And so by addressing the epistemology behind it, how we form beliefs, the idea is that maybe we can get to a better place. And usually when you're talking to someone, the person's much less defensive because you're not talking about their belief. You're talking about how they form their beliefs. So they have no reason to be defensive in that sense. And, every once in a while you can bring up their beliefs, but you're really on a collaborative journey to talk about, is the way you form a belief or any belief, is that a reliable way to form that belief? And so that's really the basis behind what street epistemology is. And I hope I made some sense there.
Yeah. But now, tell us about the method. How did you make the jump from reading about it in a book to interviewing people? And like, what was your approach methodologically?
That's a great question. It was probably around the time of the election, around 2016, and I was kind of bummed, like probably a lot of people were, and and I just felt kind of hopeless about it. Like it seemed that we have people, like large groups of people, in these belief silos, these just hermetically sealed chambers where their belief, their claims are true to themselves, and regardless of whether you're on the left or whether you're on the right. And we couldn't seem to be able to talk to each other, and we obviously couldn't talk to each other about the beliefs, about the facts themselves, and that wasn't going to get us too far. And I was looking for maybe a better way to do this. Now, my background is that is of a clinical neuropsychologist. And so, I had some background of, how we form beliefs and how we go about changing beliefs, but those kind of beliefs that are pointed inward, those beliefs about oneself, and those kind of beliefs that can cause distortions about reality. And that's, often what psychotherapy is. But I wanted to think about this in a different way. I wanted to do something that was very different. I wanted to point, I wanted to understand how we form beliefs about the world, about, any fact that we consider a fact, and how do we know what we say we know. And so that's where I started from. It wasn't that big of a leap for me to start going to street epistemology. And basically, what I did was I just I went on YouTube and see if this kind of thing had been done, and it had. And so I quickly discovered a gentleman named Anthony Magnabosco. He's one of the starters of the street epistemology movement, and also Reed Nicewonder. I ran across his YouTube videos, and I think the first video I saw was Reed's, I saw it, and I immediately, it was almost an epiphany. I kind of really understood what he was doing and why he was asking certain questions at the time he was asking people these questions about their beliefs. And Reed's style was sort of a kind of a guerrilla way to ask people about their beliefs. He would kind of set up a table at a park and just go talk to people about their beliefs, basically any belief they wanted to talk about. And I thought that was really interesting. So in 2000, jump ahead to 2019, I started my podcast called Being Reasonable, which I started, just basically trying to find people who would just talk to me about really any belief they have. And it can be any belief. It could be a belief I personally agree with, or a belief that I don't personally agree with. And hopefully during the conversation, you have no idea what I believe. And if I'm doing the conversation right, if I'm doing it right, you don't know what I believe. And I'm just asking you questions about your belief. And so then more recently, probably a year ago, I started doing videos as well, YouTube videos, and they seem to go a little bit better because there's something about, when you're trying to learn street epistemology, to see people talking and see the rapport that's being built, and seeing the conversation style that people have. And so that's sort of where I started from. So did you guys before we talked? Have you guys heard of street epistemology before?
I haven't. No.
I I had a little bit. I
Yeah.
from yeah, a little bit, but not. I don't think I had ever watched someone doing it like in your videos.
Yeah, most
Yeah.
people haven't heard of it, and so we're really trying to sort of get the word out that this kind of thing exists, and just a different way of talking about with people. And it's kind of interesting how it's where its roots started. It was kind of a way for maybe atheists to ask theists questions about their beliefs in a non-threatening way, but it can be used absolutely for someone who is a theist and wanting to ask an atheist about their beliefs and how they know what they know. And because you can be an atheist for many different reasons. If you talk to enough atheists, you'll realize that atheists' epistemologies are not uniform. That you can be an atheist because maybe it's your understanding of science, or or you can be an atheist because of your understanding of rationality, or you can be an atheist because you just had a bad experience in a religious community, or you could be an atheist because your father was an atheist. I mean, you can have bad reasons maybe to have a good belief, or not a good belief, but a correct belief. Not, if that is what is correct, and you can have good reasons and poor reasons. And so we're trying to get down to the reasons.
Hmm. Yeah. Maybe you can tell us, like, what are some of the questions you ask in your interviews, to kind of drill down into how why people believe certain things.
Yeah. So generally, what I do is, I try to build up a nice rapport with somebody, and then I really try to understand the belief, what the claim is. And sometimes it doesn't take very long, and sometimes it takes a long time, so long that we run out of time, because I really don't because you can't move on until you understand what they're talking about, what the claim is. And if someone says the claim that I believe in supernatural beings, well, that can mean a lot of things, and you're gonna have to really
Yeah.
kind of get a definition of what they mean. And it's really so important, because how many times have we had conversations and or debates or whatever, and 30 minutes later, you realize that you're not even talking about the same thing, and you're talking over each other because you're using different definitions. So it's really important to get a definition first. And even if you're talking to someone who's an atheist, I mean, the definition of atheism, it could mean not believing in a god, or it could be believing that there's not enough evidence to support a belief in a god. And those can be they sound similar, but they have different implications for a talk you might have with somebody. And so I try to really find out, or all of us in the street epistemology really try to get a good definition. And after that, what I do is I try to get a sense of the confidence level of their belief. Beliefs aren't really binary things. We believe things more strongly or less strongly, and that can change. And I usually use a scale from 0 to 7, just because it's a Likert scale that's used in psychology, and it has a midpoint, which is number 4. And so I get a good sense of how strongly or how confidently someone believes in the belief they might have. And usually, oftentimes, probably more often than not, when I'm talking with a theist and about whatever God they purport to be true, I will ask on a scale from 1 to 7, how confident are you that this belief is true? And typically that person will give me a 7, or pretty close to it. And then I on the very next question I'll ask before I start off the conversation is, on a scale from 1 to 7, how important is it for you to believe in true things? And that's also important to initially understand, because if someone says a 3, in the sense of how important is it for them to believe in true things, well, that really changes the dynamic of the conversation, because whether it's true or not, well, it's not that important to them, and maybe maybe have that belief for a wholly different reason. It could be because helps the beliefs, as beliefs often do, it helps them cope with whatever situation they might have, or the belief might serve other purposes as well. It might be to serve as an identity for something.
Right.
And
Right.
so,
Yeah.
yeah,
Do
so
you have you come across many people who would say, like, it's not that important that what they believe is true?
I do. Yeah. I've,
Ah, okay.
if you go, yeah, look at the YouTube videos, and I've posted, and every once in a while you'll come up with someone, he'll say a 3 or a 4. And it just completely changes the dynamic of the conversation. But on the flip side of that, oftentimes people will more often than not tell you that they'll put that at a 7. It's that important. It's very, very important for them to believe in true things. But as you get down to most people will say that, I would say, but as you get into the conversation and really try to understand their epistemology, that can change. And that's interesting to see that change when the person can gain insight into the reason why they have the belief. They might reduce that number to maybe a 6 or a 5, because they realize they're accommodating for something else in their
Right.
epistemology.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
I mean, is that what happens? Like as they walk through is there a journey that they sort of go on after that, explaining to you the foundations of their beliefs? Is it normally something that's very self-reflective and then they come to a different conclusion at the end, or is every path
Well,
different?
that's the magic when that happens. It's really it's amazing to see when that does happen. And these are the kinds of conversations, these are the kind of changes that you can often see that just don't happen in debates because, debates, you're defensive and you're not really trying to learn. It's not a collaborative relationship. You're not really trying to learn something that is true. You're trying to score points maybe, and really trying to it's not, it's not who is true, who seems true, if that makes sense. But I mean, that's the way I see debates. And it's not really, it's not the, in my opinion, and it's not the best way to really discover someone's epistemology and really have this honest, open conversation. And that's required, I think, for these changes to happen. Someone has to be honest and open and reflective and not defensive. And I try to create an atmosphere that way, but not always successful, because these are really difficult, these extremely difficult conversations to have. I mean, talking about one's belief is, for whatever reason, it's just it's like, talking about one's child. It's just
Mm.
really, really
Mm-hmm.
difficult.
Well,
And so usually I'll start. Go ahead.
difficult in what way? Because the thing I've noticed is that giving people time to talk about themselves, right, is it's a treat for them, right? We don't really get to do it much. People very
Yeah,
often people don't listen, right? Even in conversation. And so to actually
excellent point.
have someone's attention, when you give your attention to someone, I mean, they're kind of honored,
Yeah,
right? They
that's
love it.
excellent. Yeah, very good point. When you're trying to learn techniques of psychotherapy, that basically the first thing you need to learn is basically how to establish a good rapport, because nothing can happen without that. Nothing can happen unless a person feels, an environment where there's kind of a reasonable safety, and they're considered, their positive regard is considered, regardless of you agree with them or not, and that you have their back in a certain way. And so only kind of that kind of dynamic can someone feel free to open up, in my mind, to really discuss their beliefs in an open way. So typically, after I ask, scales from 1 to 7 about the confidence of their belief, and how important things are true to them, that's either from 1 to 7, then I'll kind of just really launch into the epistemology, and then I really try not to talk about the belief too much if I can help it. I try to understand what they know, how they know what they know, and I ask, basically, how do you know your belief is true? And it could be, who knows? I mean, there could be a million things someone could say, and sometimes I'm surprised, sometimes I'm not, and sometimes, I mean, like, you see similar themes, but every once in a while, things come at you at left field that you just wouldn't expect. You have these preconceived notions that someone has a belief, and you assume you can make wrong assumptions of why they have that belief. What I did at one point is I took my GoPro camera and I went down to, in our town, there was an anti-vax rally, and I took my GoPro down there and I just started to have street epistemology conversations with people at the rally. And I thought it was a really eye-opening discovery, in the sense that everyone you talked to seemed to they had different reasons for, there were some similarities, of course, but not everyone had the same reasons for why they were there, or why they believed that their epistemology, why they believed their belief was true. And I thought that was really interesting. And there was even one person I talked to who, there was change in, I think you could see that there was change in that person, in their confidence level and their belief, at the rally. If you can have a positive change at an anti-vax rally, I mean, I think, that says, I think, something about the technique. I mean, this is, a lot of it is anecdotal, and this is early on in our research, and early on in our ability to study this. It's a new thing that we're doing. But it is powerful, and when you watch videos, not just mine, just other people's, you can see these changes happen in real time.
When you go, I mean, going to like a anti-vaccine rally or something, I mean, it must be difficult because I think on the one hand, I suppose you're not explicitly out to change people's minds. You're more just getting them to do like self-reflection, but then it would be difficult maybe to not want to, like, if you're talking to someone who you really disagree with, like, that you would not want to change their mind.
Yeah. So it's interesting because street epistemology doesn't take sides. So I could go to a
Mm-hmm.
pro-vax rally
Right.
and use street epistemology to really understand the epistemology of people who hold pro-vax beliefs. And obviously I have my own biases, but and we're human, but it's really, I really, do my best, and I'm not always successful, but to kind of check those biases, because when those are or introduced in a conversation, it usually causes the conversation to go south, because the person sees that you agree with them or don't agree with them, and then that's not as helpful for change to occur, if it needs to occur. Sometimes we talk about the confidence they might have in a belief, and maybe we go on a collaborative journey, and it seems that where their confidence is on that belief seems to be about at the right confidence one should have for a belief like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is everyone capable of articulating their epistemology? It's one of those things that we don't. It's not something that we get sort of even rudimentary education on how to discuss it. So it seems like that it might be a challenge, but everybody is able to find a way to dig in and
Well,
think
see,
hard.
yeah, these are really great, terrific questions. Really, a lot of these concepts are difficult, and you're right. This is kind of stuff you don't. I wish these are kind of things we would learn more in school. Just kind of more general critical thinking skills and things like that. And so there are different devices that we use during these conversations to help people consider their epistemology. And these are we have street epistemology is it's a movement, I would call it, if more than anything. And we all sort of get together, and we watch each other's videos, and we comment in each other's videos and how we did certain things and how we can talk about things better, and really try to convey things that are difficult to convey. One thing that's really difficult to talk about in epistemology is the concept of truth. Truth is sort of an elusive term, and sometimes, in order to have a positive quality street epistemology conversation, you and your interlocutor, your conversational partner, needs to really be sort of on the same page of what truth is, because if you're not, then you really can be just talking about who knows what. And there are a few premises of street epistemology, and one is that there is some sort of reality, some sort of truth that we share. That it's difficult to discuss about things about people having their personal truths. And one example we'll use to help show this example is that we'll have the Tic Tac test, where I use like Mentos, these like little box of Mentos, and and someone will say, well, it's my truth, it's my personal truth that I believe that Buddy Holly is a god, and so it's my belief, and I believe it, and so. And we start drilling down to why they believe what they believe, and maybe we'll get to that point where they say, well, it's true for me. It's my personal truth, so it's true. And so with a Tic Tac test or my box of Mentos, what I'll do is I'll say, look, would you agree that there's either an even or odd number of Mentos in this box? And typically a person would agree. And I would say, I don't know what the answer is. You don't know what the answer is, but I'm assuming that there's an answer, that there's either an even or odd number of Mentos in this box. And then I would try to relate that to their belief. How is your belief same or similar or different than the number of Tic Tacs in this box? And so that kind of starts off the conversation of what an objective truth is. And so there is a premise in street epistemology that there is a reality out there somewhere that we share, that we just don't have our own personal truths. That the physics in my world works like the physics in your world. And but sometimes I'll talk with someone who doesn't believe in physics and say they only believe in metaphysics, which is fine. And I say, okay, the assumption is that the metaphysics in your world works the same as the metaphysics in my world,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and
So it
and so that is
even so it's a conversation where you have to get down to you have to
discover what reality is, or you have to even double check that we exist in reality.
Yeah, you really, before you start, really getting down in the conversation, you have to you do have to check that person, that your interlocutor sort of at least has a rudimentary agreement that we sort of share the same world. And that's not always the case. And so you're kind of, at that point, you're really stuck on what truth is. And you can't, and sometimes I'll spend the whole conversation, the whole time talking, and we're just discussing their idea of truth, and I'll discuss maybe my idea of what truth is. Not that I have a special a special line on the truth, but maybe in a sense that we can discover together like a good operational definition of what truth
Yeah.
is.
I mean, that's really strong. It's saying like it's drawing people out of their subjective reality, right? Getting them out of their heads and to live in the concrete
Yeah,
reality, at least for a little while. And people are resistant to
yeah,
that.
exactly.
That's
Very much so. It's I can see the draw to that. I can see why wanting to have your personal truth, which can be defined in different ways. Maybe, personal truth is an opinion or a personal truth. But I think oftentimes when I'm talking to people who say they have personal truths, they really believe it to be true, and it's a personal truth. And and I could see the draw from that because, well, if I want to believe something is true, therefore it is true. And you can see the draw for that, and you can see, I mean, that is an epistemology right there. That is how someone forms their beliefs. I want it to be true. I believe it to be true. It is true. And there are many, many people who are walking around who have that epistemology. And you can discuss, you know, part of, so we're not even talking about the belief. We're talking about the epistemology. We're talking about, well, is that a reliable way to form beliefs? And you can
Right,
use thought
right.
experiments about, let's say, someone believes that Buddy Holly is God. And let's say Timmy is sitting next to you, and Timmy, for whatever reason, doesn't share that belief. He doesn't think that Buddy Holly is God. And I'm a third person. I just want to know what's true in the world. I want to know what's real. Hearing you and Timmy talk, is there a way that I could figure that out? Is there a way that I could find out what's true, or at least get closer to somewhere to the truth? And that's a line of reasoning, sort of you can use these outsider tests to kind of think about things in a third person that way.
now. Do you see people who do that as being rational and in charge of their faculties, or are they around the bend? Is this a normal mode of behavior? Is it healthy? I guess.
Yeah, is it healthy? So I'm not doing so I'm not doing this is I'm not doing psychotherapy in the sense that I'm not trying to I'm not trying to cure anything. I'm trying it's is it healthy? Is it healthy? When the way I look at it, is it healthy for a society? Is it healthy for our country? So, for example, if half our country truly believes that vaccines are dangerous and will kill you, and half the country truly believes that vaccines can protect you from a virus and could save your life, well, we have some problems here. And the problem is not the belief. The problem is we're not something is happening where we're not able to form beliefs well. We're starting with some false premises, or we're our logic's off. Or we're not getting possibly to where we need to go, and because both beliefs can't possibly be true at the same time, they can't.
All right. But I mean, starting at the basic, is this like this isn't insanity, right? This isn't a grotesque mental illness that prevents people
No,
from
no. I mean,
realizing reality.
I mean, you this is seems to be a very routine, like, yes, my belief creates reality. That is a very, very common way to epistemology to form um a belief. And if you watch my videos, you probably can't get more than 2 conversations in until you discover someone who believes a belief that way.
And they're self-aware of this?
Are they self-aware? Well, no, typically people think that that is a reasonable way to form a belief, I think, on its head. I mean, on the surface at least. And that's part of street epistemology is we would go on that journey. We would discover, hopefully in a collaborative manner, whether that is a reliable way. And I really try to be open about it, because if someone is telling me a true belief, I really want to know it. If Buddy Holly is a god, I really want to know it, because I mean,
Right,
that seems
yeah.
like an important belief, you know? It seems like I'm doing things all, I might be doing things all incorrectly. And if Buddy Holly is, if it turned out that Buddy Holly was God, it'd probably change everything for me. I mean, it would just have such an impact on my world. I mean, everything I thought I know or have some sense that I know was wrong. And so if it's a true belief, I really want to know it. And so when I go into a conversation, I really try to be open in that sense, that this person, might possibly be telling me a true belief, and I want to know it. And the only way for me to know it is to really dig down to the epistemology.
Yeah. Have you had a situation where your beliefs have changed from doing one of the conversations?
Sure. I mean, even with the I tend to align myself with pro-vax beliefs, but at the anti-vax rally, I just, you hear all sorts of compelling reasons, and and um and you think about the reasons, and it's not so much you think that the reason they're using is incorrect. Sometimes it's the case where it's misallocating probabilities of certain things happening,
Mm, right, yeah,
and
yeah.
and not being able to rank order true, maybe more of a concern or a lesser concern. And sometimes, a street epistemology conversation can try to parse that out. And so, someone might think that, well, I don't want to take the vaccine because it hasn't been studied. And so, well, I mean, there's maybe some truth there, because, well, it hasn't been studied because the virus, obviously hasn't been around that long. And so on its face, that could be considered a true belief, but that doesn't, you know, that is one, what else information is that person taking into account? And why in their epistemology is that, more reflective of what is true versus some other thing, like, the probability of a vaccine not being around, her harming you, versus a virus, you know. And so it's kind of a collaborative journey in that sense. And and the thing is you have to understand, I mean, people have beliefs. It's a human thing to have have strong beliefs. For whatever reason, it's a very human thing, And after we talk about, oftentimes, if we get past the truth thing, at some point we get to the notion of falsifiability, which is really important in someone's epistemology. That you may get to the point where they believe that belief at a 7, and they'll tell you why they believe that belief at a 7, and you ask them, well, if that reason was to change, if was something that was to happen to your main reason for believing that belief, would you reduce your confidence in that belief? Well, if they don't reduce their confidence in their belief at that point, it seems like that wasn't
Mm,
really the reason,
Mhm,
yeah,
or there
right,
might be
yes.
another reason.
mhm.
And you can keep on kind of going down the tree like that, and you may get to the point where they're going to believe that belief at a 7, and you realize that that belief is unfalsifiable, that there's nothing. And then we talk about that. We talk about
Yeah.
falsifiability. So we talk about,
Yeah,
and
right, yes.
I'll use it in terms of, the way I will say it typically is, do you think it's useful to have a belief, any belief, not necessarily your belief? I'm not talking about your belief, but is it useful to have a belief, any belief, that can't be shown to be incorrect, if it's incorrect, not saying your belief is incorrect, but if it's incorrect, is it useful to have a belief that can't be shown to be incorrect? Because if a belief can't be shown to be incorrect, then how do we really know that it's true? And usually that will usually, create some insight, some reflection, sometimes not, sometimes just, the person is, they're close to, might be close to receiving new information. And so, and we will, then we need to talk about that. And so we're talking about beliefs, it's a real meta conversation
Yeah.
we're having.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Our-
yeah.
And it's a weird these are weird conversations. They are. And I just finished, it's definitely amateurish, but I just finished making a documentary about having these kinds of conversations to kind of try to illustrate how they work. And so it's on the film circuit right now. It's called Aporia. But if you go to Film Freeway, and if you can find my film there called Aporia, and I think there's a passcode which is 1212, and you can watch the movie, and then I try to illustrate there for the documentary purposes. I'm trying to illustrate that notion, the notion of how many people hold beliefs that are unfalsifiable, and how, if you hold a belief that's not falsifiable, I mean, are you holding the belief, or really does the belief hold you? Because if there's no way you could ever learn your belief was incorrect, if it was incorrect, it would appear that the belief really has you. You don't have the belief at all.
So, and that makes me think if any of this is rational. I mean, they're kind of hot words in atheist communities, right? We should be guided by reason. We need rationality. How much it sounds like people still hold on to some sort of reasoning and some sort of rationality, even if it's sort of like means and end based, right? Where they can hold on to these what we might see as irrational or unreasonable beliefs, but they have a purpose. Do you find that there's some sort of reasoning buried beneath? Or do
Yeah,
people?
excellent question. I think, and that really needs to be addressed when you have these conversations. And it's a delicate dance, because you're really trying to drill down to someone's street epistemology, and you're really, if you're looking at it at like a house, you're not talking about the beliefs, which are like on the second floor. You're talking about how they form beliefs, which is basically the
Yeah,
foundation of the
or the
house. And you're
blueprints.
kind of
Mm-hmm.
shaking the foundation a
Yeah,
little bit, right?
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And because, and you don't want the house to topple. That's not what you want
Right.
to
Right.
do. You don't want,
Yeah.
you don't want, you want, we're trying to do something positive here, not negative. We don't want to cause harm. We want to increase human flourishing in that sense. And so, um, that really has to be kept in the back of your mind. And sometimes, I've had plenty of conversations. You might believe that heaven is a real, true thing because you terribly miss your father. And this gets you through the day because you know that when this is all over, you'll see him again. Well, that's pretty powerful. It's a powerful reason to have a belief. Whether it's true or not, well, that could be discussed, but you can definitely see the reason for it. And if that's the primary reason, if someone tells you that's the primary reason why they have the belief, then maybe that's not a conversation really to have, because there seems to be a really important reason for that belief. And so, it's in the atheist community, it's probably, I get it, I do, that it's easy to see theists as having irrational beliefs and beliefs that aren't based maybe on sound reasons and methods, but it's useful to think of beliefs as more of the purpose they serve, or maybe because it creates an identity. Maybe the belief isn't really all that important, but if that person changed their belief, well, the person they're married to still has that belief. Their neighbors still
Yeah.
have
Hmm.
that belief.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean,
right.
they'd have to
Yes.
change
Yeah.
their life, even though the belief itself might not be that important. There's an identity associated with the belief, and so you can understand why beliefs don't
Yeah.
change
And it
that
is
way.
also part of like the tenets of faith, right? It needs to be difficult for you to to take a leap of faith. Is how much do you discuss faith with people?
Oh, all the time. I mean, it's a really important thing to discuss. Sometimes I'll ask what is the primary reason why what they believe, and we'll get to that reason, and it seems like, well, that wasn't the reason, and we'll move on like, well, that wasn't the reason. I'm really trying to find the reason, and oftentimes eventually we'll get to the person, the interlocutor, your conversational partner will say faith. I believe it because of faith. Well, at that point, it's very important to get their definition of faith, because faith means different things. You have to understand faith means very different things to different people. And I've had enough misfires on my own conversations to realize that when someone brings up faith, I really need to understand what they're talking about. So to some people, faith means believing in a thing where there's lack of evidence for that thing being true. To other people, a faith might mean total trust in something, trust in a thing being true, which is a little bit different. There's others. There's many definitions someone could give you of what faith is, but you really need to understand their definition and then just stick to that definition. And and oftentimes someone will say, "Well, yes, I believe it on faith, and faith is um, basically believing in something without evidence for that thing being true." And then when someone tells you that, there's so many ways you can go, so many ways you can talk about faith in that sense. And basically, if someone tells me that, I will ask first. I usually typically ask the question, "How do you know things you don't know?" Because that's basically often what they're telling you that they know something, but there's not evidence for that thing being true. So how do you know something you don't know? And sometimes that will put the conversations in a circle, make it kind of circular, go around and around. But that's okay, because going around and around like that shows a person something, that they're in a circle, they're in a loop. And it kind of, you don't tell a person they're in a loop. It's the conversational means they see they're in a loop. And how much more powerful is that? Oh, I'm in a loop. No one has to tell me that. I experience it. And so that can be motivating to a person sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah. I wanted to just shift a little bit and ask about the politics of the street epistemology movement. I guess, I mean, like Peter Boghossian and James Lindsay, I guess, are both sort of mm, anti anti woke, for lack of a better term. And I wonder if you sort of see a mm, political aspect to street epistemology.
Uh, no, I mean, it's not designed to be. I think I have conversations with people who you can go on my YouTube channel and watch me have conversations with people who are telling me or giving me claims that would be considered woke claims, something associated with systemic racism or who knows what, right? And that does not matter. I will ask the same kinds of questions to get down to the epistemology. If what they're claiming is true about systemic racism, I really would like to know it. I would like to know if it's true, and I want to know how they know it's true. And someone just telling you it's true, that's not a really good way to know it. And so I want to know how they know what they know. And will I I will question a claim like that, as I would question someone's claim who is an outward racist. Someone who says my race is better than another person's race. I will try to get down to that epistemology in similar ways. And it's about the idea that you know I try to be open, in the sense that, I mean, I think I have my beliefs, and I don't I have, what I think is true, but I really try to set those aside for the purposes of the conversation, because these are the conversations we really need to be having at this point. And it seems like we can't talk in this manner. We can't discuss woke ideologies versus not woke ideologies without things devolving for whatever reason. Why I just don't, it doesn't make sense why we can't talk about it. And this is a manner, I think, it's not a panacea, I mean, but it is a good tool to help us get there.
Mm-hmm. Just to follow up, I mean, I don't know as much about Peter Boghossian, but I know like he and James Lindsay wrote the book about having impossible conversations, but I
Yeah,
sort of
how to
feel
have
like
impossible conversations.
right, right. And I mean, I feel like I haven't read that book, but I've read like a little bit about some of their ideas, and they seem like on their face pretty good techniques and so on. But I feel like from what I know of James Lindsay, I mean, he doesn't seem to be very good at having these kinds of conversations. I mean, whereas I mean, like watching your videos, I mean, I think you really do a good job of approaching people in sort of good faith. No pun intended there.
Yeah, yeah,
Like in good faith ways.
right.
But I sort of feel like with the sort of anti woke crowd, I feel like there's not that good faith that they see the left wing as, you know, well, very like sort of have sinister aims and so on. So yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
So Nathan, so that
Hmm.
is a
Hmm.
claim. You've just made a claim,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
what
Hmm.
from a street epistemology perspective, I
Hmm.
would want to know your confidence level in the claim. I would, and I would, and 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 I would like to know that. I would like to know how you know what you
Hmm.
know is true, and
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
might be your confidence in that claim may be perfectly justified, or it might not be. I don't pretend to know the truth, and so that the whole yes, there are people who do it better than others, and maybe just because you know the process doesn't mean you can employ the process as well as there's just like anything, there's people who know how to do certain things and people who practice to who do certain things. But in order to practice this, you have to be able to involve yourself and really get down into claims you might not agree with. You might really and be open to that maybe you're seeing things incorrectly. It's just you have to be open to it, um, and it's not to say that your belief is going to change, and it really talks more about the nature of beliefs. That there's such stubborn things, um, and I think we we get involved in certain things because of the identity we talked about or the psychological benefit from having a belief, and not so much about how do we really get down to, is this a reliable way to form this belief that I have? And you might have a correct belief about something, and you might just have but you might have come about it with a poor method to get there.
Right. But so one of the things I know that you do follow-ups. You've interviewed people a second time.
Yeah.
And whether it's
Hmm.
about Christianity or about their belief in tarot. Um,
Sure.
what do you find changes, if anything? Is there a change? Is there, when you talk to them the second time, what's different? Is there anything different?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the reason often why I have follow-up conversations is that these, it's difficult for belief change to, happen, and or it's difficult for someone to adjust the confidence in their belief they might have in one conversation, because beliefs can be so stubborn that way, and sometimes it takes a few conversations to really get somewhere. And sometimes with one conversation it goes really well, but sometimes in one conversation you've just there's a rock that's in someone's shoe now, and they go home and they might think that you're crazy for asking the questions that you've asked, and these questions can sound very crazy, but they start thinking about it, and I'll sometimes wait 3 months or 6 months, and I'll contact them again and say, hey, would you like to come back on and see if anything, if your belief has changed on this, if at all, and if at all, why, and if you've reduced your confidence in the belief or have increased your confidence in the belief. And it's really, it's been eye-opening, I think. Sometimes it hasn't worked out at all like I've expected. No, at all, because sometimes, you have to be these conversations are very difficult in the sense there's this thing called the backfire effect that, by asking questions about someone's belief, rather than them questioning their belief, they become more entrenched in their belief. It's a real, it's a phenomena. And I would say when I've had conversations like that, that conversation probably didn't go as I expected, but maybe, it could have been this case where they needed to become more confident in their belief for whatever reason. And I mean, it depends on the belief, I suppose. And so it's that is something you have to definitely look out for. But I would say the vast majority of people I talk to, it's really been a corrective experience for them. It's really been interesting, and it's really been this insight that's gained. And I mean, I still keep up with people who I've talked to since 2019, and it's just really been a cool process to go through this.
Yeah, and I mean, so I guess at this point I can ask, like, what's the goal? What do you hope they get out of it? If I assume it's not about changing their mind.
Well, I wouldn't mind someone's mind to be changed if that mind, if someone is believing an untrue belief, let's say,
Oh, yeah, something
and
that's demonstrably false, and
yeah,
they.
if someone's believing an untrue belief, and again, not that I have a corner of what is true, but if theoretically, if someone is believing an untrue belief and wants to, and thinks it's very important for them to believe in true things, then yeah, I'd want that person to be able to change their belief. I mean, of course I would. Sometimes I'll ask the question at the end of a conversation, if, and I'm not saying this is the case, but if you happen to find that your belief in this was incorrect, would you want to know it? And it seems like it'd be an easy question to ask, but sometimes through these conversations, you kind of have to think about that for a second. Like, yeah, well, would I want to know it? That might make me more sad about things, and I don't know if I'd want to know it. You know, um, I believe strongly that I love my wife and my wife loves me, but if that belief was not true, would I want to know it? Well, yeah, I guess I'd want to know it, but damn, think about that for a second, right? And so, and so, these beliefs we have, they're really important to us, and there are reasons why we have them.
Yeah, I could think of situations where I might not want to know the truth about something. I mean, I guess it's maybe easy to think of examples where you might not want to know the truth, or at least you'd like you said, like you'd maybe hesitate before learning what the truth is. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, because learning the truth about something and it just rocks your world. There are reasons to hold on to these beliefs, regardless of whether they're true. And sometimes people will tell you that. Sometimes what people will tell you, what difference does it make? And it might not make a difference, but
Yeah.
in the larger whole, I would make the case that it does, because if half the people truly believe that the election was stolen in this country, and half the people truly believe that the election was fair and real, and assuming there's a truth there somewhere, believing in false beliefs really can get us into huge trouble.
It sounds like a lot of this is how we. It comes down to making sure we're able to relate socially, or just to connect beyond our little bubbles.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing. You're absolutely right. I mean, that's another reason to hold a belief, is having absolutely nothing about the truth value of the belief. It's just more tribalistic value of the belief, the tribalism of the belief, that it just by holding to the belief, regardless of the truth value, connects you to your tribe, to your group. And if you didn't have this belief, you'd be in a different tribe, and you could be outcasted from your tribe, and that's yeah, and it makes it very difficult for us to talk about. So we have to. It makes it difficult to have these conversations. It's difficult, if someone is holding on up to a belief for a tribalistic reason, that's a really powerful thing to overcome.
Then where should we be? I mean, if we kind of just do this to ourselves, what are the things that we, I don't know, for the sake of our own well-being, or is this about well-being? Is it about our ability to interact? Is it just our acceptance of reality? Like, where should we be on this? Is it appropriate to draw a line and say, like, this is where you should be. If you're not doing this, it's bad.
Yeah, I mean it's very personal, and sometimes, often I'll judge of how well the conversation has gone. I use a certain benchmark, and at the end of the conversation, if the person is asking me epistemology questions, I think it's been a raging success, because they're questioning their epistemology and they want to know what I believe. And again, not that I have any corner on the truth, but they want to know how I see things. And sometimes people ask me that, like, well, what do you believe? Or how do you form your beliefs? And typically what I tell them is it's really straightforward. If something is true, I want to believe it. If something is not true, I'd rather not waste my time with it. And merely asking somebody, what do you believe? Or even why do you believe this? I find that I'm not really getting closer to whatever that is. And then it's only when I start asking questions of how do you believe? How do you get there? That maybe if I can learn that, I can really maybe get to at least in a better direction of what's true and real. And, and I've held, like everybody else, I've held so many false beliefs. And just because sheer numbers, for every true belief, there's probably an infinite number of false ones, and it's just so easy to have. It's just so easy to have them. And I just really try to apply street epistemology on myself, that if I'm having a false belief, I really try to use this practice on myself, so I would be able to discover it, so I don't have to go further down this path believing in something that I really don't want to, rather not believe in.
Mm-hmm. That makes it sound so easy.
Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, I can say that, but tomorrow I'll go and just start thinking, just form a false belief about something, and just because it's just so easy, it's just
start buying lottery tickets.
I'm
Today's
not
the day.
I'm not yeah, right, exactly. I buy a lottery ticket, and I'm going to pick the numbers based on birthdays rather than random numbers. I mean, who knows, right? And I'll just form a false belief about something, and it's very human experience to have this. I mean, I'm not an evolutionary biologist, but I'm sure they would tell you that there's good evolutionary reasons to form beliefs in this way. But I'm just thinking, in this time in our world right now, it's just to have beliefs formed in these manners that are maybe less than reliable, we're getting to a dangerous. I mean, that's my biggest concern about this world. I think we're just getting to a really dangerous point. And maybe we're not. Maybe that's a false belief. Maybe this time in our world is it's like any other time we've lived in, but I'm just judging that from the only time I'm happen to be alive. So I don't know. But regardless, I think I'd like to change
that's also prediction, and I think that gets into a different realm, right? Because there is no true future. It's not written yet. So we have a lot. We're basing it.
Well, that's a claim. We could talk.
Right? yeah.
We could talk about that.
Right.
yeah.
So after you do this for a while, you start listening for claims. You perk your ears up for claims. People say, and it's not that I disagree with you or agree with you. It's just like I just heard a claim, and then we can go down that journey and just kind of discover the epistemology of that.
Which category can I put this in?
That's basically.
Yeah. But speaking of truth,
if we can lighten the mood a little bit,
Yes,
we have the
I
lightning
got it.
round is based on what a true atheist can and cannot do. So
Yes, awesome.
you're allowed to. They're yes or no questions, but you can give short answers, and you can don't go too far down. If you
Yes.
find yourself in a loop, we will point it out though.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'll try to not be too annoying with one of my responses.
Annoying might be even better because yeah.
Okay.
And we might need to add
Yeah.
some addendums to these. But Nathan, would you like to start with can a true atheist?
Sure. Okay, the first one, the easiest one maybe. Can a true atheist believe in God?
Well, I think that probably is, yeah, that's so.
Okay.
I would say that A does not equal not A.
Right.
So-
Okay. Okay. Right. Okay.
Definition.
Yes.
Okay, then the other
Right.
side of that coin
Yeah,
is
right.
can a true atheist be 100% certain that God doesn't exist?
Can be 100%
Yeah.
certain.
Or a 7 out of
Well,
7.
yeah, I think that would speak. You're right. Yeah, I think that's a hard place to be, a difficult place to be. I mean, maybe some people can, and to be there personally, I don't know too many beliefs I have are above a 6, maybe. So, I mean, I'd like to remain open about it. I think if theists, if if there's a God, and that's especially a personal God that moves things in my life, and I don't know, I really, if that's true, I would really like to know it. It would change everything I believe about the world for sure. I think it would, for me, for my confidence level to change on that. I think it would need a lot of evidence for that to be
Yeah.
true.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I don't at this point. I'm not I'm not confident that that's true, but I'm willing to adjust my confidence on that.
I'm going to mark
Mhm.
that as a no.
Mhm.
Okay.
You got it.
Can a true atheist be rude to religious people?
Can they? I
Yeah.
mean, yeah,
Can
sure
they?
they
Yes.
can.
But
Yeah, I
should
mean,
they?
should they? I don't think, in the spirit of epistemology, I don't know. I just don't know where that gets us. I think in order for us to kind of bridge these gaps, I think we kind of need to try to be nicer to our fellow humans, and and really try to understand. They have the belief they have because of all the things that have happened before them to that point, and kind of treat it that way, um, and try to detach. I do try to detach the belief, the claim, from the person. Sometimes that's hard to do. So I'm not sure if I answered the question. But
Perfect. Can a true atheist be curious about religious faith, but maybe make it more like, can a true atheist have faith, have a form of religious faith?
Yes, I think you could. I think you could be an atheist based on faith, in the sense that, if we're defining faith in this case of the absence of evidence, you're not basing your belief, or I guess, or lack of belief. I really should probably talk about a lack of belief in a deity. If you're basing that on, I don't know, what your neighbor thinks, or I guess I'm trying to describe it in a way that, I think you could just have good reasons and not so good reasons to believe, um, something that's true. And I guess I'm trying to think of faith. Could you have faith that atheism is correct? Could you have? Hmm. It's hard for me to think about it, because I guess what makes me hard to think about it is because atheism is a lack of. It's not a.
Well, we
It's not
can
a
turn that
positive belief.
around and
It's a lack
say
of.
that it's a materialist world, because one of the tricks with falsifiability is it's quite often in the wording. So if you replace the negative with
Yeah.
a positive, you can do it.
Yeah. So yeah. Then in that case, I suppose you could have faith that it's a materialistic world. I mean, yes, it could be argued that there is evidence for that, but someone might not believe that based on evidence. Someone might believe that we live in a materialistic world based on a number of other reasons. So in that sense, I would think you could.
This is the deepest anyone has ever gone.
Oh, so yeah, so I'm trying to be annoying.
Can a true atheist use dreams and revelation as an epistemology?
um, I would imagine some do. I would think. I think, the question is, could they use it as a reliable epistemology? That I don't.
Mm-hmm.
That we'd have to delve into.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure. I don't really know what dreams can tell you about the truth value of the world, but I'd always be willing to discuss that with somebody and try to understand that better.
Wow. Wow. That's a yes. That's fantastic. How about this one? Can a true atheist believe in astrology?
So can someone believe that there's no deity, have a lack of belief in deity, yet believe that the the positioning of the stars affects someone's personality or future? I think so. I think you could. I think you could simultaneously hold both. What do you guys think?
Yeah, in theory, I think you probably could, but should you?
Like all good pseudosciences,
Maybe
it's
Well,
not.
often dressed up
Yeah.
in like things like the gravitational
yeah,
positions.
right. And so, I mean, you could have you know, a good epistem. But typically how these things go is that, um, this kind of getting down to the epistemology of it is that when how someone forms beliefs. Typically, if someone doesn't believe in astrology, they probably also don't. That same person doesn't believe in a deity because their how they're forming their beliefs seems to be in a similar method. It's much more unusual to have a disparity there because there's some kind of weird compartmentalization of epistemologies going on there. It would appear to me. I've talked to, at least 2 or 3 astrologers on my on being reasonable, and it's always really interesting to talk about. And it's often easier conversations at least in our culture to have when you're talking about astrology versus when you're talking about someone who's like super super duper religious and whatever religion that is. um, it just seems like there's, at least in our culture, there's a little bit more of an open conversation. At least that's how it's been so far, or the conversations I've had.
Mm, wow,
Mm-hmm.
that alone,
Mm-hmm.
that's an interesting find.
Can a true atheist be vaccine hesitant?
Yes, I think so. Sure. I mean, I was saying, I think I get it. I think, um, I understand why someone might not get the vaccine. I might not personally agree with them, but I understand vaccine hesitancy and what kind of epistemology would form those beliefs, and on how someone views science and how I get it. But I mean, yeah. So I mean, as far as someone who is an atheist and is vaccine hesitant, I get that, how that could happen.
Wow, Mark, I'm going to be stuck in my head for the rest of the evening now, constantly questioning my own beliefs.
Well, yeah.
But it's also fascinating watching you do it with other people, and like it's interesting hearing their beliefs, one, and then it's the way that you know how to do it. Like, I mean, just like that you're a good listener and that you probe and that you push it forward. It's a fascinating process, and it makes it even more interesting than just having someone sort of bark at you.
Well, anybody can do this. I really want people to try it. I mean, this is the whole point. I don't put videos up there just for no reason. I mean, I really want people to really just try the process. Really, I don't see how too much to lose here. It's just because you're just talking to somebody who might have a different belief than you. So what, and that's probably going to be a good thing. And so, when I first started trying this conversational technique, if you listen to some of my earlier podcast episodes, are basically unlistenable because it stunk. I mean, I just didn't really. It's
Yeah.
hard. It's a really hard. You got to think about it differently. You're asking questions more in a Socratic method style. you're really not telling you what you believe. You're trying to not talk about facts as much. You're not talking about the belief. How strange is that? And so it's a weird way to have a conversation, and it definitely takes practice. But I hope more people will practice it and just try to get better at it. And there's the Street Epistemology Discord server where people can go, and if you want to learn about it, learn how to do it. There's typically always people on there practicing with each other. You just go into the Discord channel, and there's different rooms you can go into and bring up a claim that you might agree with, a claim that you might not agree with, just any claim. And then so one person is the belief holder, and the other person is the street epistemologist, and you practice. And that's a good way to get good at it with no skin in the game, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll have to link that below. And anything else you'd like to plug? We know you've got your movie, podcast, YouTube channel.
Yeah, I think that's it. I appreciate having me on, and I think what you guys are doing is terrific because, I mean, just in the name of itself, it's beyond atheism. I think I've listened to a number of your shows at this point, and I hope more people listen to what you guys are doing. And because, I mean, the way I could be wrong, but the way I see what you're doing is that we have had the new atheist movement, that sort of thing, and we sort of cycled through that, and I think we sort of squeezed that lemon. And and so the question is where, truly, and even in the sort of the mission statement of your podcast is like, where do we go from here? And so I think it's not enough to hold these beliefs or lack of beliefs, that maybe this can be somehow implemented in ways to benefit people and to make our at least a little corner of the world a little better. And so I do appreciate what you guys are doing.
Thank you. Yeah, that means a lot. Nathan, there's a lot to talk about. Where do you want to start off in this discussion?
Well, there was a lot of things I thought about from the episode. One thing I was kind of thinking about, and maybe I mean, since the episode happened, like maybe I should have asked, is to ask whether there's actually like better or worse epistemologies, and then like, are there better ways to know the truth versus others, and then how do we know that? Like, how do we know? Like, how do we determine which ones are better? Like, on what basis are we using to determine which is better? Just because I happen to be listening to one of the interviews he did with someone, and they were just sort of saying like, whatever you believe is true, basically, for you. And that seems to me like probably like not a really good epistemology to have. So that led me to the question. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I like where he drives it though. This idea of true, right? Because there is a question of what is knowable, right? There are things that we can't know whether or not they're true. There are things that it's impossible to verify. There are matters of subjectivity. There's all sorts of stuff. But this idea of questioning these beliefs and sort of driving down and finding where this fault line lies. There may not be a fault line, right? You can drive down and be like, yeah, I believe this is true. This is like my core belief, and I also believe it's true, and this is how I know it to be true, right? These things can match up depending on how we know it. So let's not kid ourselves here. He is saying that like truth is normatively better, right? It's better to believe true things than things that aren't true.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
That may be a subjective norm. That may not be something that's a universal truth. To put it the only way I know how right now, right? It may not be true that that's the best way to do things. But having like talked to him about it and gone back and rewatched it and seeing, okay, like now I get how it works, and it makes it a little more. It makes it a lot more interesting. It makes it clearer to me what's going on. And it is kind of a fascinating way to even sort of interrogate ourselves and our beliefs. Have you done any of that since talking to him?
I mean, not in depth, but I mean, obviously, I do sort of think about, yeah. I mean, like how I would do if I were to be sort of being questioned by him. I mean, not that it's like an adversarial thing, but I mean, I think one's worldview can be exposed to be kind of like shaky when you're forced to like explain why you believe X and Y. I mean, like, well, what I think it was on maybe one of the comments on one of his videos. I mean, like, if someone was to ask you like, why do you believe that the Earth goes around the sun? I mean, most people haven't done the experiment themselves to verify that that's true. And they maybe they couldn't even explain. I mean, I don't think I could. Like, how
You
would you
want to
even?
think about something awful?
Yeah.
You want to
Uh-huh.
imagine something? I think about that all the time. How we know the world is round. Here's a great question. What would the sky look like if the sun revolved around the earth? That's a crazy one, right?
Yeah. I mean,
I'm
I don't
always
know. I
trying
mean,
to like match the position of the moon, the visible moon, to the sun. Always trying to figure out ways like how do we know these distances?
right.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
we're different people, right? And that's one of the reasons we ended up where we did. And even like doing this is that we're inquisitive.
Yeah.
And
That's true.
and
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a certain amount of like Kantian doubt that we carry in our understanding of the world, right? We don't come from places with complete certainty. We understand like intellectual training gives you the ability to see different perspectives, use those perspectives to come to different conclusions, and then interpret and evaluate the differences between them. But that you have to be intellectually trained for that. And that's so something like this is, I mean, I don't want to, it's not so much a parlor trick as it is like an introduction to that form of thinking, right? Having it
Hmm.
foist upon you.
Yeah. But I feel like I don't know whether it's purely about like education or whether it's somewhat just the way you're like your own kind of character or something to be skeptical or whatever. I mean some people are skeptical about the wrong sort of they're like in the wrong ways and um yeah, I mean so I don't know. Yeah, I mean I think it's like I think there's something about like evaluating evidence, but it's also like in so many cases like we're not the ones evaluating the evidence ourselves, like we're evaluating the people who are evaluating the evidence.
Yeah.
um
Yep. Yeah.
so and then like you do sort of need to know like or have some idea of like who is an authority to trust and so on.
Yeah. No, you're
um
right. Yeah,
yeah.
that's a great point because he is driving at a specific point. And it is fascinating to see because a lot of the videos they have that moment where people are forced to reckon these competing ideas in their head and they don't really know how to do it anymore. And that's pretty awesome. And where we kind of agree with his perspective already, right? Whereas if a person had faith, or a person of faith were doing the same thing to us about questions of trust and faith, we might be flummoxed as well. Like you said about things like revolving around the sun. How do we know that the earth isn't flat? How do we know math actually works? How does technology work? There's a lot of this stuff that we just take on, we just trust that it's going to work. There's a certain amount, a degree of faith. Don't want to use that because we know how complicated the definition is. But I believe it was Mark Maron who said it. It's like, well, we heard it from a guy, right? That's kind of it. Well, I heard it from a guy. And that guy knew a guy who totally did that work.
Yeah, I think there's also something like that knowledge is kind of like a collective process that is like built up over this centuries and millennia, I guess, of like competing arguments and experiments and so on. That yeah, it's something that you get to with the help of other people, and I think
Yeah. And this
that's something too.
idea that like science is this monolithic external being that
Hmm.
holds
Yeah. Yeah.
absolute certainties and knowledge. We
Hmm.
know, I mean, like it's the same thing like when you go through level after level of education, you understand what science really is and how it's messy and how it's uncertain and how it's competitive.
And
And that
and it's like a human process. I mean, it's
yeah,
not like some sort
it's
of, yeah.
probabilistic. It has like people have
Mm-hmm.
egos involved. People have it like there's confirmation biases. Things that we think are things that sound really good often don't get tested as rigorously as they ought to be, right? Like this happens all the time. And when we went through things like COVID, where it's really messy and nobody knows anything, and you're getting bits and pieces, and you're talking about probabilities, that's very, very different than talking about the certainty that's in like the number, the number of grams you need to make an atomic bomb or something like that, or the how accurately we can measure the radius of the Earth, or how we can place satellites in orbit. It's why the moon stays where it is. Those are very different questions, and they're worked out to different levels of probability, and they're understood in different ways.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, going back to, like, to his own sort of mission, I guess, is like he mentioned about kind of trying to kind of I mean, not in this grandiose terms, but like kind of like heal the divide in the US and the rest of the world, I guess. I mean, and I do think like conversations, if they are focused more on like level below the beliefs, like how do you know this thing? Maybe is a more fruitful way to get at these questions than being like, you know, vaccines work, no they don't. Like, and then like it's sort of, yeah, I mean, and then let's like you could ask, how do you know they work, or how do you know they don't work? Yeah, I mean, I feel like that might be more. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that would solve the problem. I mean, but
Yeah, and this is something that I think we've talked about before, that like truth is often sought in the wrong ways. And it goes back to Hume, right? Like this idea that we don't like it's in the name of his show, right? Being reasonable. We don't use that to discover the truth. We use that to show that we're right.
yeah, right.
Right?
Yes, yeah.
We're trying to confirm the things that we already know. So we're going to go out there and we're going to cherry pick, and we're going to find the things that match our expectations. So to that extent, like truth can be harmful to our beliefs,
Hmm.
and people and will naturally reject it. But he did, like, he came to a good point though, where it was like, I think he said he was looking for the question, but like, what are the things that are going to push you to going with truth over feeling, intuition, faith, reputation, groupthink, confirmation, self-preservation, whatever it is, whatever those things are, what is going to push you to seek the truth? And I think that's really powerful. And there's something in there, right? Like this is if it's not the tool, it's a tool that we put in the box, especially when we're confronted with faith, because there are cases where, like most cases, if you are faced with a terminal illness, do you turn to science and doctors and medicine and genetics? Do you go the way of evolution, the way of science that has been disconfirming biblical proof forever? Or do you turn away from that and do you turn strictly to prayer, right? If you believe you can be healed by prayer, you believe that's true, which path do people take? And for Christian Scientists, they have to choose the path of faith, right? Like that's what they do. But most people, religious or not, turn to science. And it'd be the same thing, like if you're about to face an army, if you're Ukraine and you're facing down Russia, are you going to turn to technology and outside power? Are you going to use like the best way to marshal violence, or are you just going to pray? Which do you think is what is the path that you would take in an existential crisis? Would it be toward faith, or would it be toward a material reality? And I think, like, when faced with that existential problem, most people intuitively, right, fall back on on science, on a
Yeah,
material
I mean,
worldview. I should say. I should put it that way.
yeah, that's true. Although, I mean, I can also see, I mean, not that I would endorse this thing, but I mean, I can definitely see, like, if you're in kind of a hopeless or a seemingly hopeless situation, that you would abandon your rationality in favor of religion, which may give you comfort or something. I mean,
Hmm.
um,
But
yeah,
that's the
yeah,
question is it? Yeah, yeah, that's true.
hmm
Yeah, I can see that.
yeah. I mean, I don't know. I
People
mean,
turned, but it's usually the story that we normally hear is that, the doctor, she went to 3 different doctors and they all said there was nothing they could do. And then she turned to faith, right?
hmm hmm
It's not the first place you go,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah,
right? You never
yeah.
hear like, well, the doctor said it was really bad. So she said, screw you guys, I'm going to church.
hmm Yeah.
That's not the typical narrative.
hmm Yeah, that's true. And well, anyway, I mean, yeah, I mean, the episode provided much food for thought, and yeah, I mean, we could probably go on and on,
We could.
but I think the
I would
episode is
I would just like
already
to say, because I haven't gotten to do
pretty
this
long.
in a while, I
Uh
think
huh.
it was Derrida who said that like every ideology rests on a central contradiction, right? That there is, no matter what it is, it's somewhere in the philosophy, in the belief system, you're going to find something where you just can't square that circle. It's always there. And that's a weak spot. And this might be one of the things that leads to that overcoming, right? You force people to face this contradiction, right? I believe in faith. It's all about that. We only know what we know from the Bible. Okay, but how do you know it's the true faith? If it's not true and it can be demonstrated it's not true, do you switch faiths? I mean, that can cause a crisis, and we know how fragile faith is. It's an interesting project. I mean, it's a work in progress. So it's fascinating to see it, and people can get in now as well. If you believe something weird, he would love to hear from you. If you believe something normal, sure, he'd love to hear from you.
Yeah,
As long as
yeah.
you're willing to really, think about it,
I think
and we can discuss it.
yeah, like hearing of him interrogate like someone who had a like quote unquote normal belief would be just as interesting, I think. So I guess we should wrap it up, and so just
Let's do it.
encourage
Yeah,
people to support us on Patreon if you're enjoying the show. And there's some extra bonus content with Mark
absolutely.
as
We
well.
love having you. We love having listeners. We love hearing from you guys at Nath G. Alexander on the Twitters. There's even more stuff for you if you throw us a few bucks.
Yeah. Oh, and yeah, we should remember to thank our patrons, Lars, Debbie, and the AHS Plus blog.
Fantastic. We appreciate it. Love it. Yeah, they get the bonus content and you don't. So think about that. That's where the real truth is revealed, Nathan. That's where the
Yeah.
real
Right.
truth
Yes.
is. It's where we find
Yes.
out. It's where we get all the answers.
hmm
So if you're interested in Mark Solomon, check out the links below. If you want to contact him and be interviewed, he'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, like, subscribe, push the button, ring the bell, pull the string, whatever you got to do. Stay awesome, you guys. All right. Talk to you later.